So to make these projects, you need your heat tool, whether it's like, I like the American Crafts Zing or Zap heat tool, but if you have the Ranger heat tool, any heat tool will work. Some paint brushes, some smaller tipped paint brushes. I have them in a couple different sizes. A pipette, and then your alcohol inks, which I'm using the same colors as yesterday. So recap, that's coral, sunshine yellow, limeade, and turquoise. And then I use this little palette, but any sort of container that you have to hold the mixtures will work. I just like this little compact palette and isopropyl alcohol. So step one is to take whatever surface or whatever container you're going to use and fill each of the little pockets with some isopropyl alcohol, and then you just add a little bit of the alcohol ink. You'll see when you add it, the more you add, obviously the more concentrated the color is going to be when you apply it. The less you add, the more sort of diluted that color will be. I like a slightly more saturated, so I put quite a bit in, but that's something you're just gonna have to play around with how much and how little you add. But I put a decent squirt into mine, not just like 5 drops. I put like a decent amount in. So I will first show sort of just like the generic background. So this is using the pipette. Oh, and Yupo paper. I forgot to say you need Yupo paper. So you need a surface, obviously, to work on. So I'm gonna grab a sheet of Yupo paper. I'm using the white heavyweight Yupo paper, but they have lots of different styles Ranger does to work with. I just personally like this one, but it would work on any Yupo paper that you had. And then I'm going to take my pipette and I'm gonna pick a color. I'll start with the blue. And I'm just gonna drop some on there. Then I take my heat gun and just sort of play around with pushing the inks in a direction. So it's gonna be loud, I'm sorry. So you just keep on doing that until all the little pools of alcohol ink dry. And you'll see, just a second, everywhere where sort of the remnants, like the last little puddles of alcohol ink, wherever those last little puddles, you've blown them, that's where you're getting these like nice, rich, saturated little marks. And I really love that look. And also the farther away you hold your heat gun, the less it's going to push. So if you really want sort of a more softer edge, you don't want all these like jut outs, you can hold your heat gun from farther away and it's not going to force the ink quite as far. The closer you hold it and the more angled you hold it, the more you're gonna get these, which is personally for me, like that's what I'm going for, the more you're gonna get these fun little shapes and little elements that to me are just so fun, because I don't know, you can't get this kind of look any other way apart from buying a Vicki Boutin paper or something, because she's really good at stuff like this. So then you can go ahead and keep applying the same color. Like this one's got pinks and oranges and greens. This one's just pinks and oranges. And you can go, all blue and then all red, or you can do a couple blue, then a couple red. The nice thing about alcohol inks is they kind of, the colors will blend a little bit, but you're not gonna wind up with a brown if you put 3 different colors, one on top of the next on top of the next. Like this flower, I started with blue, then I put green on top of the blue, then I put yellow on top of the green, red on top of the yellow, blue on top of the red, and it's not browned the colors, like it's not mixed them all together and turn them into a gross brown. Like each layer, even though it's going on top of the one below it, is still showing its color that it actually is. So you don't have to worry about making sure you do the light layer first and then the next layer up. You just get to play and have fun and you don't really have to worry too much about wrecking it. So I'm just going to do a couple more just so you can kind of watch how it works. I'll maybe hold my heat gun farther away for a couple and then closer for a couple, just so you can kind of see. But this is the kind of thing you sort of have to do it yourself to really understand what I'm saying. But I'll show you a couple more so you kind of get the idea, and then I'll show you how I made these little flowers. Let's go red. And then also, the more, obviously, the more liquid you grab, the more space and room you have to play around with shapes and having fun with the movement of the ink. So see, from far away, I don't know if you can see, it's just kind of spreading in its own shape, but as soon as I go close and start shooting it in directions, that's where I get the fun little legs, and like that looks like a snail. How awesome is that? Another thing to note, my craft mat is like, my children have used it and it's like super warped and curled, and then also this paper as I heat it warps and curls. So it is now, like, the more I work on it, the more the ink is going to want to like flow away because it's a little bit warped. You can, like when I tried to make this rose, I taped it down so that it stayed flat. Like I just taped it right onto my table to keep the work surface flat so that I was in more control of where the alcohol inks were rolling on the page, as opposed to where the paper was warping, having the control over where that was going to go, if that makes sense. So if you can find a way, or if you have like a really level surface that you can work on that isn't going to affect having your paper warp and curl, that is helpful as well. That's just something that I noticed yesterday when I was trying to make the flower. Yeah, the warp in my craft mat, which I'm sure most of your craft mats are in much better shape than mine, so maybe not a problem for you, but my children like to craft way too much. Let me do some green. All right, so I don't know if that translates that well in video, but that is a really simple way to create a very cool, very unique, everyone's going to be different background or element to then die cut out of and make really fun textured die cuts. So that is fun option. And then if you do want a little more control, if you go on Pinterest, you will see a million videos of people taking their pipette and like dropping a circle of their alcohol ink and isopropyl alcohol in the middle of their page and then heating it, and it just like spreads out in a really nice circle, and then they add another layer and it just spreads out in a really nice circle. Mine went all over the place. I couldn't get it to go in a nice circle, and this was like attempt, I don't even know, 4 or 5 or 7, who's counting? Not me. But this was the best that I could get in terms of having it actually be a shape that I was hoping to achieve. So I thought to myself that maybe if I could not gain the control that I wanted with my pipette, maybe if I applied the alcohol ink with a paintbrush instead and kind of forced it into the shape that I wanted and then heat it from farther away, I might have more control. So that's what I did. And I got these, which I'm very happy with. I think that they turned out really cute. And at least for me, that's the look I was going for. So I was very happy with that. So I'll show you now how I made these little flowers. And then I put them on like a big sheet of paper and then just fussy cut them out after. I didn't like make it on a small paper. So I am going to do like this rainbow one here. I'm going to show you exactly how I made this flower here. So I started with the blue. I did a reverse rainbow. I just grabbed as much of the mixture that I could in my brush and just started to make a puddle in the middle of my paper. I had to do this a few times for the bigger flowers. Once you start getting into the center of the flower, it takes less ink, obviously, but to get the big base, it does take a little bit of time. And it is going to, you will still have a little bit of ability to make it sort of imperfect and get like those messy edges. Like it's not like I'm sitting here really carefully getting like perfect edges. I just wanted to have a little bit more control. And I anyways was struggling to achieve that with just dropping puddles with my pipette. So I've kind of got the shape that I want. Now I just need to fill it in a little bit more. I just want the color to be a bit more saturated. So I'm just going to get a bit more ink in here. Once I have gotten what I'm pretty satisfied with, I'm going to set my paintbrush off to the side. And now this time I'll tilt this up a little bit so you can see about how far I'm holding my heat gun away. So I'm going to start from quite far because like I'm really bad at gauging distance, and then you can always keep moving in as you want. But if you start too close, then you're going to like shoot it somewhere you don't want it and you can't take that back. So I prefer to start from really far away and slowly work my way in until it's got sort of a force that I'm happy with. All right, and just like that, my first layer is done. Now I'm going to do the same thing. And again, I'm using that larger of the paintbrushes. These are the Ranger paintbrushes, and I'm using this. It's still pretty small, like it's still considered a pretty fine tip paintbrush, but the larger of the two, until I got to, I think, the yellow. For the blue and the green, I use the larger paintbrush. At a certain point though, it grabs too much ink and the alcohol ink spreads too much and it's gonna overtake the layer underneath of it. So for these layers, I'm just using my large paintbrush. Now this time I'll paint another circle that's just a little bit smaller than the one behind it. Fill it in again. I just want it to have a little bit of saturation. And it is going to seep some, so you don't want to paint it to exactly where you want it to end. You want to give yourself a little bit of room for that puddle to expand. It doesn't expand much, but a little bit. You want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Now, one of these days I'm going to be brave enough to try this with like the metallic alcohol inks, because I feel like having some like metallic edges, it would be so pretty, but I'm just not quite brave enough yet to try that. But if any of you are very fluent in metallic mixative alcohol inks, I totally recommend you try it and show me how it worked. Okay, now I'm going in with the second color onto green. And again, I really appreciate that I'm able to apply this completely much less pigmented color on top of the blue, and it still looks green and beautiful and rich and vibrant. I love alcohol inks so much. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch to my smaller paintbrush for these last couple layers because I don't have a lot of room left now. My circles are getting rapidly smaller and smaller and smaller. But the good news is then they also dry a lot faster.
Chantel, can you move it a little closer to yourself? We can only see like a quarter of the
I'm
paper.
so sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to tilt this down now too because I'm sure you kind of have an idea of how far away I was holding the heat gun. That's the only reason I had moved it. Sorry, Val. The replay has a great angle on my phone, so that's the good news. So you do have to be pretty careful as you get to the inside layers because you really don't have a ton of workspace, and if you put too much it just will seep too far and you can't really take that back. So just be careful once you get to the center section. Less is more because you can always add more, but you can't really take away if you've put too much. Right, and then for the last one, I'm not gonna have room, I don't think, for blue in the center of this, so I think one last little red one will be the end of this flower, and then I'll hold it up and show you what we made. All right, so that is what that looks like when it's all done, which I don't know, I just love that so much. So to me, this is a super cool technique. I love it. Like, rather than buying a pattern paper with flowers on it and fussy cutting a flower out, cut this thing out and use it as an embellishment on a page or a card. I just think they're beautiful. You can layer them. The Yupo paper, super.
It's amazing.
Yeah, right? It's very easy to do. I was struggling and getting a little bit frustrated when I tried it with the pipette. Other people have great success with it, so feel free to try that if you would like. But I really liked having a little bit of control, just for me, just the right amount of control, where it still looks random and it still looks messy and imperfect, but I'm still winding up with a product that I'm happy with. So yeah, I really liked this technique and was quite excited to share it. So hopefully some of you are able to put that to use in your crafting. Any questions?
You might have said this yesterday, but is there a difference between like using the isopropyl versus just the blending solution?
No, you probably could use the blending solution as well. I use I just grabbed this isopropyl alcohol because for me, I was doing all kinds of techniques. Like yesterday, I was doing some spraying out of the mini mister, and you can't spray blending solution. So I just got this because it would work for all the techniques that I wanted to showcase. But I can't see why this wouldn't work with blending solution, this technique.
I'll have to try it out.
Yeah, for sure. And someone said that, yeah, this would be good for a geode. And Kim, yeah, I thought the same thing. I told my girls, I'm like, because my girls love rocks. I'm like, it kind of looks like when you like cut open those rocks, right? Especially if you're brave enough to work with the metallic ones, because then it would leave like gold rings. Oh, it would be so pretty. But I'm not quite brave enough to try that just yet.